yourself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot see.
Good morning, welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. Saturday morning means I'm joined by Mick Lewis. How are you, Mick?
I'm very, very good, Steve. Thank you very much. You?
Great, mate. Excellent. And it's what you've just described on your bit of paper as what?
This is that was the week this was.
Yeah,
that
fantastic. I mean, it has been a hell of a week since we last spoke, hasn't it? I mean, there was me people questioning me sanity for daring to suggest a draw last week. But what a performance by Newcastle and Man City, because it takes two teams to produce a game like that, Mick.
Well, it's not everything that. It's about the week it was. It's not about Manchester City. It's about the whole week it was. I was thinking to myself yesterday, when was the last week I could think of a conceivable nature? And the only one I could really think about was a fantastic week we had, albeit very, very disappointing ultimately, was the week we had when we went to Lisbon in the UEFA Cup and then went straight back from Lisbon to Cardiff and the Millennium Stadium for the FA Cup semi-final. At that stage of the game, at that stage of the club history, we were still knocking on the door in Europe. This was with Graham Souness at the time, but Big Al was still around, at Shea Given, etc., etc. And we went to Lisbon and then went to Cardiff in the FA Cup semi-final. Yes, we were beaten by both, but those sorts of days are suddenly beginning to suggest that they might be on. We might be returning to those sorts of days, and that was 20 odd years ago or thereabouts. So it was a long time ago. But going back to the fact that, that was the week it was, it wasn't just about Monday, about Sunday against Manchester City, which was a phenomenal performance, phenomenal game, brilliant spectacle for the neutrals as well. Monday was then followed by the fact that the CEO, Darren Eales, sat at his desk and started his job as our top honcho as far as Newcastle are concerned, and we've been crying out for a CEO for a long time. So we went from Sunday to Monday. Tuesday, the lads got ready for Tranmere. Tranmere, yes, you might think Tranmere is a small thing, but Tranmere is about, getting through the next round of the Carabao Cup. And then don't forget, on Wednesday night, we got a home draw in the next round. That'll be tricky against Crystal Palace, by the way. So you're through to the next round of a cup competition. And then 48 hours later, all hell breaks loose. And we're back in the lines and back in the realms of Big Al and Michael Owen and unveiling huge record signings. But this time to the tune of 60 million. We bring a boy across from a Swedish kid from Real Sociedad, Alexander Isak. And what a week. What a week. I mean, just think about those sorts of things. I'll throw in another one as well, by the way, because I don't want to forget this. And I do want us to talk about that this morning. There was a 19-year-old from Whitley Bay on Wednesday night. He'll have been forgotten in amongst a 60 million pounder and a new CEO and a fantastic performance against Manchester City. But a senior debut for Elliot Anderson on Wednesday. He's a player. And I really loved the way that, he set about himself. He looked completely he looked comfortable. He looked at all the world a first team player. So Elliot Anderson should get a special mention about what a big week it's been for him as well. What a week.
Amazing week. And as you say, just rounded off nicely by the acquisition of Alexander Isak. What's he going to bring to the team, Mick? I mean, 22-year-old, good international player, just coming in at the right time.
Good question, though, Steve. Good question. And we don't know. There's no point anybody telling you. In fact, I just saw Alan Shearer's sort of his bullet points from his latest column with The Athletic. If you get a chance to read The Athletic today, Big Al's there talking about Alexander Isak, and he quite rightly, as a lot of us are saying, well, we don't know what he's all about. He's a young man. He's a young man You know, we've talked about the likes of John Dahl Thomason in the past, etc., etc. You know, yes, he's a proven player in so much as he's played over 30 for Sweden. But, you know, when people say, oh, he was at Dortmund, he was here, he was there, he was barely at Dortmund. He was a teenager. He got a loan spell at Willem II in Holland, where he didn't play an awful lot of football. But it's Sociedad where he really kicked in against Real Sociedad, and his track record is pretty good. But he is only 22 years of age. He's a young man. It is far from proven. Far from proven. He isn't the finished deal. He isn't a finished deal by a long way. So we've got to keep an eye on it. We've got to have a look at him. You know, I was thinking about myself again this morning. You know, we've spent 60 million on Alexander Isak, which is fabulous. But don't forget, we've spent 65 million on Joel Linton, allegedly a centre forward, and 25 million for Chris Wood, a centre forward. And they have not pulled up any trees in terms of goals. So, you know, they are the hardest thing in the world. And that's why Shearer is the person you need to speak to today about what it is about being a centre forward, and a centre forward, in his case, a world record signing. But in the case of Isak, 60 million. I mean, there's not many I think he must be top 10, mustn't he? Premier League signings. He's now a record goal scorer for Newcastle United. But that wears heavy on you as well, the weight of 60 million. And again, Shearer knows all about that. So, but Shearer was a proven player, you know, when he joined at Newcastle United. So I just like what I've seen about him. There's a very good article on NUFC TV. There's one or two interviews online where he talks about his days in Sociedad. He talks about his days in Sweden. He talks about his family. He talks about his siblings. He talks about his history in Eritrea. He talks about how hungry he is, how ambitious he is. Clearly, he's articulate. He speaks well. So there's an awful lot to like about Alexander Isak. But when you say me and you ask me and I ask you and we ask each other, what do we think? We don't know yet. We might well start finding out against Wolverhampton Wanderers tomorrow afternoon.
Interesting take from Eddie Howe's press conference yesterday was when asked the question, you know, would him and Wilson, you know, maybe be able to strike up a partnership? He said yes. Yeah. So, I mean, that in itself tells you that, you know, maybe, you know, that they, you know, won't just be looking at one playing and the other playing, you know, when the other's injured.
And it doesn't take a genius really to work it out. If you look, I mean, we don't know a huge amount of Alexander Isak from what we've seen. But what you do see is, and what you do watch and what you have noted from him is that he's not a box-to-box centre forward. He's not a poacher. He's not a barnstormer. He's not a huge physical presence. He's a tidy player. He's a busy player. He's a clever player. He's everything that Callum Wilson is. Callum Wilson's that. Callum Wilson's a clever player. He'll bring into other players. You just get the impression that you know that if Isak drops wide, then he dovetails with Callum Wilson. Likewise, vice versa. Whether we can get Callum Wilson fit enough is the burning question. But certainly, I agree with you. There's absolutely no reason to suppose that Callum Wilson and Alexander Isak can't play together and can't work together. And let's really, fingers crossed, because it's not about Alexander Isak in terms of his fitness. It's about Callum Wilson. Because let's not forget about Callum Wilson. Please, let's not forget about Callum Wilson. Because I've maintained for a long time now, he's the best I think we've seen since Shearer at Newcastle. Everything about the fella is quality. But he has this terrible problem with injuries. Let's hope it can get sorted out, because at this minute in time, you have to say the argument is against it rather than for it.
Yeah, I would agree, mate. I would agree. Lots of questions coming in. We will come to those very, very soon. Callum Wilson out injured, sadly, Mick. I mean, the big talking point, I guess, for all of us, you know, we need to get a striker in case Wilson gets injured. He's only lasted a few games, mate.
Yeah, well, I mean that's what he's there for. That's what Alexander Isak is there for. I heard one or two conversations yesterday. Obviously, the question was asked in the press conference with Eddie Howe, who who didn't really either way suggest one way or the other. Basically, will he start against Wolverhampton Wanderers? Obviously, the argument seems to be that because Eddie Howe decided to give Bruno a little bit of a breather when he first arrived, he gave Sven Botman a little bit of a breather when he first arrived at Newcastle. Everybody seems to be of the opinion that he might do the same with Alexander Isak. I would argue that on two fronts. One, necessity dictates, and necessity at this minute in time is that we have no Callum Wilson. Chris Wood, to date at Premier League level, hasn't really done the business. Alexander Isak is fit, so I would think that he would start against Wolverhampton Wanderers. The other thing, interestingly, and I mentioned this a week ago when we were talking about the pre-Manchester City press conference. Again, he was asked Eddie Howe about transfers, and he made a very interesting point last week. This was a week ago. I'm pretty sure he didn't know for definite that Alexander Isak was on the way, but he did say, don't for a minute think that I'm not prepared to bring somebody in and stick them straight in if they're big enough, if they're good enough, etc., etc. So I thought that a week ago. Now I think it even more so now. I think he's not afraid at all. You know, I mean, if we think back to it, the Bruno situation, we were in a really good place trying to survive. We were in the middle of that 9-game run, which ultimately saved us. So it would have been idiotic to change it and bring in Bruno at that time. Likewise, Sven Botman. You know, Dan Burn and Fabian Schär have done great at centre-backs. They deserved their place at the start of this season. So he left Botman out. As it turns out, because of Targett's injury, it's changed it. But that isn't... There is no justifying reason, really, for me anyway, to put Alec Isak on the bench tomorrow, because we have no Callum Wilson. We don't score goals enough at this minute in time. So I'd be very surprised if he didn't start. I wouldn't be surprised either way, and it's probably wishful thinking on my part, but I would like to see the young man start tomorrow against Wolves.
Yeah, that was one of the questions in the chat, and I do think 100% he will start. Yeah, he's a good enough player.
I think you have to. On top of that, Steve, you've paid 60 million. You've paid 60 million, and again, if you listen to his NUFC TV interview, he's an ambitious boy. He wants to play. He's already scored this season against Barcelona for Real Sociedad. He's up and running. He's playing in La Liga. It's not as if he's missed out pre-season, or he's a bit rusty, or he's been sitting around waiting for a medical for 3 or 4 days. You know, Eddie Howe very quickly yesterday wanted to stick him on the training ground as soon as the signatures were signed. And clearly, I don't know whether he did for definite train yesterday, probably not, but he will definitely train today. There'll be no doubt whatsoever that Alexander Isak will be training before they leave for Wolverhampton Wanderers later today. And I think that, to me, suggests that he's ready to start at Molineux. And how exciting will that be? How exciting will that be?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I think a lot of people are very, very excited, and rightly so, about our new acquisition. And lots of people want to know who we're going to look at in the final few days of the transfer window. A couple of questions. Do you think we'll buy another striker and a winger before deadline day? Lots of people in the chat asking, do you think we should go for a defensive midfielder, such as Roger Cook there asking the question. Some people want to know, do we think that Pedro is still a possibility, or whether the fact that we've signed this young lad, young Swedish lad, Isak, the Pedro deal might now be off. But what I would suggest, Mick, is we never hear about these transfers that come from out of nowhere, and these are the ones that are getting done.
And that's exactly the point I was going to make this morning, Steve. We've spent 3 months, 2 months, 2.5 months hearing from alleged experts, pundits, punters, internet, newspapers, you name it. They have thrown every name. They have thrown every possibility. They have thrown every permutation under the sun. And I think all I've ever said is, Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. And all of a sudden, none of them had picked Alexander Isaac. Yes, there was an interest in him. Of course, there was an interest in him. It's like me saying, I'd like to win the lottery tonight, but I'm not going to do it. You know, they wanted, or they would have been interested in Alexander Isaac. Everybody was interested in Alexander Isaac. But, you know, there was also a money situation as well. So you can forget that. So, again, as you say, if people are starting to say now, oh, this will happen next week and that, we don't know. We don't know. Eddie Howe yesterday, when asked, do you think he expect more deals done next week? He sort of said, I'll wait and see and I'll find out from the powers that be. And it will come down to the powers that be. He also made a very good point yesterday, and this shouldn't be lost on people as well, Steve, and that is, in any transfer, yes, there is a buyer, but there's also a seller. And I get the impression that 2 months ago, a month ago, maybe even a fortnight ago, maybe even a week ago, that Real Sociedad weren't a seller. All of a sudden, they have become a seller. And they've made themselves known to anybody, including Newcastle United, that they might be willing to take Alexander Isaac. And Newcastle have said, bingo, we'll have it. And going back to the mitigating circumstances, I know everybody has spoken about it's down to Callum Wilson. Alexander Isaac has arrived because Callum Wilson is injured. Now, there is an element of that. Eddie Howe admitted that. There is an element of that. But at the same time, you still needed Real Sociedad to suddenly decide that they decided to do the deal. I mean, they bought him for $6.5 million. They've sold him for 60 million. They've got 10 times their amount. So it's a big deal for Sociedad. But the other thing as well that I think people have lost on this in terms of why Alexander Isaac has suddenly arrived, not because of Sociedad deciding they're available, not because Callum Wilson is injured. Do you know what I think as well? I think the chairman at PIF, Yazid Al-Yaman, is there. He's got his flag. He's got his PIF shirt on. He's watched Manchester City 3-3 with Newcastle at St James's Park. And I think he's bitten the bug again. I think they've bitten the bug again. I think PIF have again thought to themselves, hang on a minute, we've got a good thing with this Newcastle situation. You know, the problem with Riyadh and PIF a lot of the time is that they are a huge, huge operation. So when they have their weekly meetings, they'll be talking about the billions that they've got involved with Boeing, with Facebook, with Uber, with Disney, all the companies, huge companies, way, way above the money that they're involved with Newcastle United. They're doing these meetings. They're doing these deals. But all of a sudden, this little deal that they did, and I say little in inverted commas, with Newcastle United Football Club in the northeast of England, I think they've looked at it and they've thought, hang on a minute, they've just picked up a point against Manchester City. They were 3-1 up against Manchester City. They are our competitions. They are our rivals, whatever the competition is between Abu Dhabi and the Saudis. You know, there will be competition there between them. I think they've had a little look at it, a little smell of it, and another taster of what Newcastle United could do. They were there in the stand. Al Ramyan has watched it. He's seen it. And I think if the call has been made at the time about Alexander Isaac, they've said, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. This has really whetted my appetite, if it hadn't whetted it already. So there's all sorts of, factors involved, but I'm pretty sure that was one of them.
Yeah, 200 million spent in 2 transfer windows and more to come potentially in the next 6 days. So trust the owners. It's not something we were saying for the last 14 years, but we can certainly put a bit of faith in these guys and girls. It's been fantastic. Mick, this is an interesting one from DS. Good morning, everyone. Last week, Mick said Miggy and Maxi needed to step up in the City game. How did he rate their performance?
Of course. Well, it's obvious. I mean, particularly St. Maximin. But, as good as I watched it and as good as I thought it was fantastic, etc., etc., and I think I've said this 2 or 3 times. We could talk about there's the 4 of them. I think we tried at one time to give us an idea of gold, silver, bronze here one morning about the French quartet. So you've got Ginola, you've got Robert, you've got Hatem Ben Arfa, and now you've got ASM, and they're all much of a muchness. They're all peas of pot. Ginola, yes, defensively wasn't the greatest. Going forward was fantastic. Laurent Robert did fantastic things. Hatem Ben Arfa did unbelievable things. But they were all a bit like ASM. They all fluctuated. They were all a little bit inconsistent. They all they never stayed around long enough. So the question with ASM is, and I'm sure Eddie Howe thinks this, and I'm sure the staff think that, yes, as brilliant as it was against Manchester City, and it was, and he was out of this world, and I've said all along, you've been a little bit less sure of it, but I've always maintained you've got to keep him because he's a talent. He's a talent, but that talent can only last so long, and that consistency has to build upon. And that's the question today. That's the question. Can he do against Wolverhampton Wanderers exactly as he did against Manchester City? Can he do it then against Liverpool? Can he do that then against Bournemouth? Can he do that then against Crystal Palace? Can he do it week in, week out? I talked before here about Hatem Ben Arfa. I remember a night at Aston Villa years ago, and he was absolutely beyond off the pale. Unbelievable. And I sat down with him. I remember standing on the pitch line saying to him, Hatem, you really, really look like you've got it. And he said, yes, blah, blah, blah. The next game, absolute nightmare. So you've got to wait and see. It doesn't happen in one night. It doesn't happen in one game. ASM, if he does it, then yes. But if not, then I'm sorry, we're back where we were 3 months ago, 6 months ago. I think Almiron is probably slightly more questionable. I mean, again, he played quite well against Manchester City, but the miss at one stage where he stuck one over the top of the corner from 6 yards. These things shouldn't happen. So yes, let's enjoy the whole Manchester City experience. Let's particularly enjoy again what Almiron did, but more so what ASM did. But let's hope the more that they do against Molineux. Let's hope the more that they do against Liverpool, whoever. We need more consistency. We haven't seen it. Whatever the saying is, one swallow doesn't make a spring.
No, definitely not. The other news coming out of St James's Park this week, I guess isn't surprising. A couple of people asking about it as well. Tom Dixon, what's your thoughts on Dubravka potentially going to Manchester United? Paul Patterson says the Dubravka situation worries me. I definitely don't want to lose him. He's on par with Nick Pope. I certainly don't want to strengthen Manchester United, who I see as a rival for the top 7 this season. So what's your take on this Dubravka situation?
Well, I think I've said it, Steve, haven't I? I've said it, 3-4 times here in the last month, that I fully expected that there'd be every chance that he'll leave. Because in the same way as I only said 2 weeks ago, in the way that Sven Botman has come straight back in after a one layoff, that Bruno has eventually got himself back. Dubravka has done nothing wrong, has done absolutely nothing wrong in reasonable, senses anyway. As it's turned out, on the basis of what we've seen in the last couple of games, Nick Pope is probably the better of the keeper. So therefore, Eddie Howe and his staff are absolutely a 100%. But as I said at the time, I like the fact that players don't want to sit around, are not prepared to sit around on their backsides and do nothing. And that happens more with goalkeepers than anybody else, because their deputy or their second in command isn't going to get injured anytime soon. So, once upon a time, you had goalkeepers who'd sit. I mean, Steve Harper's a good case in point. Because of Shea, Stevie Harper, spends 6-7 years not doing anything. Now, it's a bit different these days, but I was always, for the last 2 or 3 weeks, been of the impression that Martin Dubravka will probably think, I need to play football. Now, whether he plays football at Manchester United or starts at Manchester United is another argument altogether. But maybe he's just a bit upset, and I haven't got a problem with that. And I think we shouldn't be surprised by that. As I say, he has done very well for Newcastle for the last 2 or 3 years. When Newcastle were poor defensively, we were an absolute shambles. This guy was almost keeping us in games on occasions, and then all of a sudden he finds that he's surplus to requirements. I don't have a problem. I feel a certain amount of sympathy for Dubravka, but that's just football. They're not exactly shy Bairns footballers, and they're certainly not poor Bairns either. So just let him go. Let him go. If he doesn't want to be at the football club, let him go. To my mind, Carl Darlow as a stand-in is just as worthy a place as Martin Dubravka on the bench. But if we consider that, and we do consider that Nick Pope is our now number one, then just take it as read, and let's go with what the future is.
Yeah, that's it. Can't keep an unhappy player. Big thank you to our sponsor, Skips and Bins. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to Darren Baldwin Funerals, independent funeral directors. Find them at 304 Old Durham Road, Gateshead, or by calling 0191 478 2730. Or website www.darrenbaldwinfunerals.co.uk. Thanks to Garden of Healing Dispensary, CBD hemp and cannabinoid specialists, www.gohd.com. And thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. You can find them at mrvickies.co.uk or by calling 01768 210 102. Thanks to Away Day Clothing and to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wales and Newcastle, and the guys who run our website. If you want to subscribe, hit the NUFC Matters logo in the bottom right-hand corner. You can subscribe for free. Hit the thumb up to like the video and click share to your social media. We're also available as a podcast. Goes up 24 hours after the show has finished on YouTube, where it's available on iTunes, Spotify, Podcast, Podbeans, and the rest. Don't forget, you can also join the channel. Click join underneath the video or use the QR code to take you straight there. NUFCmatters.com and click membership. What do you get? Well, you get a cup, a pen, a scarf, and a membership card, and entry into the monthly draw. And thanks to QTech, we gave away 2 tickets for the Brentford game last night. Julie Baker was the lucky winner. And if you subscribe, we do give you a car sticker. Just email john@nufcmatters.com and he will post you one out. We also support the food bank. NUFC fans, foodbank.co.uk is the virtual bucket. You simply need to click on that website and you can make a virtual donation, which is very important. And Peter Beardsley Soccer School. If you want information as to how you can register your kids onto the soccer school that Peter runs, go to info@peterbeardsleysoccerschool.com. Okay, back to your questions. And Stephen Kennedy says, is it wise to sell any of our players to Premier League sides as they can pass on all of Eddie's tactics and player weaknesses? Let's try and keep us as an enigma to the rest. I mean, these kind of things will happen, I guess, Stephen. But yeah, I mean, look, I think the Man United thing is what really annoys people the most. I think that Dubravka wants to go to Manchester United, a club who, messed us around with Jesse Lingard, and thank the Lord they did, I think, to be honest, looking at what we've brought in now with the money that we've got. But they're one of the big six who didn't welcome Newcastle to the table, I guess. And I wouldn't want to.
But at the end of the day, Steve, as we've just mentioned there, he's a goalkeeper. I mean, I'm not having a go at goalkeepers, but they are goalkeepers as opposed to outfield players, as opposed to, say we left Johan Cabaye as a midfield player. Say once upon a time, as we famously did, left Andy Cole, and Andy Cole went to Manchester United. This is A, it's a goalkeeper, and B, as it stands at this minute in time, it's probably highly likely to be a second-string goalkeeper at Manchester United. So it's going to have no great bearing on where Manchester United finish this season as opposed to Newcastle United, if indeed we continue ourselves on the journey that might make us contenders in terms of where Man United finish and where we finish in the table. So I'm not too worried about Dubravka. in terms of other players, Lee, one of the ones who, on the basis of what, having singled out Elliot Anderson at Tranmere and how much I liked him and how much a lot of people should have, everybody, the Tranmere thing, I was a bit annoyed by the fact that everybody raved about Kieran Trippier. We don't need to rave about Kieran Trippier. Kieran Trippier is an international, fantastic fullback. But it was Kieran Trippier saved the day. Kieran Trippier did this. Kieran Trippier put 2 crosses in for Lascelles and Wood to get the goals, blah, blah, blah. That's what Kieran Trippier does. Kieran Trippier wouldn't expect it. It's against Tranmere Rovers. What we should have done is focused more on Elliot Anderson, 19 years of age, a young kid making his senior full debut and looking completely at home. So fair play, Elliot Anderson. The other one, going back to players who might leave between the end of the transfer window that I wouldn't want to leave, and again, I quite liked on Wednesday, was Jamal Lewis. I like Lewis. This is a kid who, don't forget, before he joined Newcastle, was very close to going to Liverpool from Norwich City. He's lost his way. He's had injuries, etc., etc. So, I think, again, and this is what happens when, you make 11 changes and the whole world and his wife looks at you and looks at what Newcastle are doing, and not only Newcastle fans, but other teams. And I'm absolutely certain one or two teams will have looked at Elliot Anderson and immediately looked at Tranmere Rovers and Prenton Park and said, just make a call, will you? Just find out if he's available. Or are they going to keep him in the 25? Well, they don't have to keep him in the 25, of course. But is he going to be loaned out again as he was last season against Bristol Rovers? But I'm sure one or two other clubs will have looked at it as well and said, just stick a punt at Newcastle United and find out whether Eddie Howe fancies Jamal Lewis and whether they might take him for a loan or they might take him on a deal. Because I think he's a talent. I really do think he's a talent. Yes, we've got Matt Targett. Yes, we've got a sort of, at this minute in time, a steady away, ready-made left fullback. But Lewis he's got a bit more than that. It's certainly getting forward. If you needed to think of it, because he wanted originally, I think Liverpool wanted him as a wing back. So yeah, going back to will we lose players I think we'll have to lose a couple because we're a bit top heavy now. I mean, if you think about the signings, Steve, we've signed 8, £200 million. You've mentioned we've signed 8 since January. 7 of them are essentially first team footballers from pretty much now on in, with the exception of the Shah, Botman, Byrne 2 from 3 situation. But we've essentially got 7 of 8 starting the game, starting a team. Now that is some turnaround. Often you might get 2 or 3, you might get 3 or 4, you might get half a team. We've got now, essentially, on occasions, 7 new faces in that 11. So, again, going back to Eddie Howe, will he get more? Does he want more? You always want more, but it is getting to the stage now where it gets dangerous. It's like Forest. You've got 16. They're named again with somebody again yesterday. They've got 17, 18. Now, the worry is that you've got too many and you're mixing and matching too much. Now, do we mix and match too many, or is Eddie Howe, happy with leaving 1 or 2 out the bench? We'll just have to wait and see. But I think my feeling at this minute in time is it's highly unlikely that we'll do any major deals. We might do a little bit of tinkering between now and the end of the window. There might even be a loan situation. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, loan deals, of course, can be done, and Newcastle will still be active, I think, in the transfer window. John says, Mick, in terms of quality, do you think the City game is one of the best we've seen at St James's Park for decades?
Absolutely, certainly for a while. I mean, I think we only mentioned last week about the Arsenal win at the tail end of last season, which, of course, essentially was a win rather than a draw. But you're not talking about like and like, are you? You're not talking about, yes, Arsenal are a big football club. Arsenal are a very important football club. Arsenal are a very impressive football club and are much stronger this season than they were last season, and will make it very difficult for the likes of Newcastle to push on anywhere in and around 6 and 7 spot. But when you compare against Manchester City and you compare against a Manchester City at full tilt, it's not a weakened Manchester City side. It's not a Manchester City side that was breezing through. It's not a Manchester City side that was neither here nor there. I think we said last week, in an ideal world, you'd want Newcastle right at it and you'd want Manchester City at substandard. No, none of that. Manchester City were not substandard. Newcastle United were toe-to-toe with Manchester City. And as a result of that, you've got to say, I mean, again, going back to when was the last good week I could remember, and that goes back to 2005 with the week in Lisbon and the week in the FA Cup semi-final against Manchester United. That was just off the top of my head. But off the top of my head, the last big games, I mean, what would you compare it to? I mean, maybe Benfica with the Europa League quarterfinal, where we were getting close to a European final, but that wasn't of the sort of standard. That wasn't of the sort of opposition either as Manchester City. So going back to what John says, I couldn't think off the top of my head, but you would again talk as I was about the week. You're probably talking 20 years. You're probably talking 20 years since Newcastle were playing involved with a game like that against a team like that with a result like that. And it wasn't even a win.
Yeah, I would agree. Any truth in the rumours to Alvarez? Lots of people asking about that. Dean as well, asking about that. I mean, look, the advice I've given people, and Mick and others on this platform have said is, look, just ultimately wait until the deals are done, because it's quite clear that a lot of these people in the media and a lot of these in the know people on social media aren't in the know. They know absolutely sweet FA.
The bottom line, Steve, is, and we sound like a scratch record here. I feel like a scratch record because I use a 5-letter word called TRUST. Trust. Trust Eddie Howe. Trust the owners and see what happens. And have they not been true to the word? As I've just said there, £200 million, 8 signings, of which 7 are virtually first-team footballers, one of which yesterday at 60 million quid was the record signing of in Newcastle United's history. Now, if that doesn't trust people, and if people aren't prepared just to trust them, then they're just stupid. They're just stupid. And you're just wasting your time listening to idiots online or watching idiots online who are telling you nonsense because they know nonsense. Just trust them.
Yeah, exactly. It's just trust the process and trust the owners. They haven't let us down so far.
Exactly. I mean, and people think, well, that's an easy thing to say. It's not an easy thing to say, because for 14 years we had a fellow who we didn't trust. We far from trusted, and they let us down, and he let us down, and they almost dismantled this football club because there was no trust. Trust is a huge thing. People think it's a silly thing. It's a simple thing. It's a thing that people just throw away. Or trust him. I'll just trust him. Trust is a huge word, and trust is something that should be generated, and trust is something that should be prized, and it is prized, and they've been true to their word, and we should prize them as a result. It's a trust incident. It's a trust episode.
Yeah, of course it is. Alan Thompson says, Mick, what did you think of Tranmere Rovers? They went over the top for me. There's been physical, but it was much too much. What's your thoughts?
I must admit, I only really started seeing it and hearing about it. I mean, I watched the game. Of course I watched the game. But I didn't think it was too much. I mean, again, maybe because I thought it was fairly straightforward. Maybe because I wasn't paying the sort of attention to it that you might with Wolves tomorrow or Manchester City last weekend, because it's Premier League and you never really. I mean, it got a bit hairy late on because Tranmere were pressing, but I always thought we were fairly comfortable. So maybe I took my eye off it in terms of missing incidents that were happening left, right, and centre. But no, I didn't. I mean, I remember there was one very good one in the second half where Kieran Trippier got caught, and I thought, oh, metatarsal, because it looked for all the world like he kicked through the studs of the Tranmere player. But that wasn't the Tranmere player's fault. And Kieran Trippier is bold enough and brave enough and honest enough to know that. And he got himself up and dusted himself down. He knew he just mistimed the challenge. But I didn't think there were things flying around left, right, and centre that were potentially injuring Newcastle players or wounding Newcastle players or were doing things untoward. Yes, there was a bit of pushing and shoving at corner kicks, etc. But I don't think there were nasty things flying around. So I might have got that, but and I've heard one or two people say it. But no, I didn't think it wasn't. And I think Eddie Howe has never mentioned it. It wasn't mentioned in his press conference yesterday. I mean, Emil Kraft will probably be out long term, but again, that didn't seem anything malicious. So your general thought process will come along thinking, well, if we've lost a player because of a nasty injury, then Tranmere were a bit naughty. But I didn't think so.
Yeah, it's just a typical game against lower league opposition. That's what I thought.
But bless them. I mean, Tranmere Rovers again. Come back to these sorts of things. The whole adage about there for the grace of God go I, etc., etc. Tranmere not that long ago weren't a million miles away from Newcastle United. And don't forget, they were in the National League. They were non-league not long ago as well. They've had to come back. They've had to drag themselves back into the Football League. So a game against Newcastle United is going to be the biggest game of their lives. They want to try and impress. They want to really have a go at it. But no, if it was a bit overzealous, if it was a bit sort of a bit adrenaline driven, I don't know. But it wasn't malicious. It wasn't nasty. They weren't doing anything to try and wound Premier League players or Newcastle players. As much as anything, they were probably trying, to either for Newcastle or for anybody in particular on TV, to get themselves a move away from Prenton Park, somewhere up the league ladder.
Tom Dixon's asked a couple of questions. He says, Mick, with Alexander Isak who do you think we should be looking at next? What positions? I would say we need a right winger and a midfielder. What are your thoughts on that? And he also asks, do you think anyone will be shown the exit door at Newcastle? Eddie Howe's been quite consistent on that. He doesn't really want to lose anybody if he can help it.
Well, I mean, exactly. It's a very, very, very fine line. There's an awful lot of balancing involved. I mean, hey, for instance, if Callum Wilson was fit and well tomorrow, right? So Callum Wilson and Alexander Isak play tomorrow, right? If this is philosophical. If they play tomorrow, who do you play? Do you go back to Eddie Howe's tried and tested 4-3-3? So that means one of ASM or Almiron misses out, presumably. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So who misses out tomorrow? If Callum Wilson and Isak were both fit, both available, both ready to go, one of them has to go. So for my mind, of course, Almiron at this minute in time has to go. So you start with a 3 of ASM, Callum Wilson, and Alexander Isak. And how spectacular potentially does that stand? But what it does is it's a bit unfortunate on Almiron, who's done brilliantly well. But not only do you then leave Almiron out, you've got Tom Dixon wanting somebody else to come in as well. So who does that? Where do they come on the pecking order? So you've got to be very careful. You can't just keep buying for the sake of buying. Yes, you need a squad that gives yourself. What was the old adage? You need two of each. So you need 2 centre forwards, you need 2 right backs, you need 2 left backs, you need 2 centre forwards, etc., etc. So that's the way to do it. But if all of a sudden you're a bit overloaded in one department, then you've got to either let some go or say to yourself, no, we've got enough. And the argument is always, again, going back to last week, the week before, that just the bottom line in football, never buy players who aren't better than players that you've already got. So if you want to buy another wide player, you need to buy another player who's better than ASM or Miggy Almiron. And Alexander Isaac is better than either Almiron or ASM at this minute in time. So the deal is done. But don't do it for the sake of doing it next week, just because we fancy another one. It takes time. It takes time.
Yeah, of course it does. Of course it does. And yeah, we've got plenty of that. And Tom also says, how many goals do you think Isaac will score for us?
Oh.
What, in general, Tom, or this season?
I mean, the one thing you would say is, and again, I don't want to sort of be negative, but he's not prolific on the basis at this minute in time. If you go through his stats, if you go through his numbers, I think he's about 9 in 30 odd, 37 is it Sweden, something like that. It's Sociedad. It's not bad. It's not bad, and La Liga isn't really a league that is particularly prolific. And in fact, in one of his interviews yesterday, he did say one of the things he liked about coming to the Premier League and coming to Newcastle United is that the football he feels, and a lot of people genuinely seem to think that football would be more attractive to him and suit him better than La Liga. La Liga is, essentially a little bit negative. It can be very nastily physical on the times as well. I mean, the Premier League, nobody gets kicked in the Premier League these days. Nobody gets touched in the Premier League. So Alexander Isaac will probably quite like that as well. But how many goals will he get? I don't know. I think what you do in these sort of scenarios is, when you're only 22 years of age, you are a bear, and he is a young one. I think Eddie Howe and the staff and the club generally will probably be more than happy just seeing his acclimatization, just seeing him that he's settled. You don't want him to score a hat-trick on his debut. You don't need him to score 15 goals in his first 6 months of the season or whatever. Whatever happens between now and Qatar. Don't forget, you see, this is the other problem. We've got this bloody break for the World Cup finals. So you've got a lad who's just about got up ahead of steam. He's just got used to the tune. He's just got used to the fans. He's just got used to his teammates. He's got used to the Premier League and Newcastle United. He's enjoying it. And all of a sudden, 6 weeks and we all disappear, And on top of that as well, I was talking to a colleague the other day who made a good point. You've also got to worry about in the 2 or 3 weeks leading up to the World Cup. So you're talking then about the end of October, which isn't too far away. You'll find players getting very worried about the fact that they don't get injured because they want to play in the World Cup finals. And Alexander Isak might be one of those. He's an essential part of Sweden's national side. So maybe he's thinking to himself, hang on a minute, I've got to be very careful here. Callum Wilson, who may hopefully by that time will have come back from an injury. Gareth Southgate might have been saying quietly to Callum Wilson, look, you're in line to go to Qatar. Just be very careful. Players will do it naturally anyway. They don't need Gareth Southgate to tell them. They just all want to go to the World Cup finals. Of course they do. It's the chance of most players' careers to go to a World Cup finals. So a lot of these players are gonna, for the last 2 weeks leading up to, the trainee squads, etc., prior to the World Cup, I'll be very, very careful about what they do in Premier League games. So there's all sorts of issues about this Qatar and the World Cup. And it certainly doesn't help Newcastle United dealing with getting Alexander Isaac ready for a full-blown career as a Newcastle United record signing striker.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, Newcastle United got a big match tomorrow at Molineux, 2:00, live on Sky Sports. 3,000 away end tickets sold out as usual. And Eddie Howe's press conference yesterday, we were told that John Joe Shelby, of course, is still out. Callum Wilson is only going to be out for a couple of weeks. There was no news on Emil Kraft and his injury, which did look
it's long standard. It's long season, isn't it? I think
did look bad, yeah. And Ryan, news of course on Ryan Fraser, Jamal Lascelles, and Dan Burn. They should all be available for selection. And as we've already talked in depth about today, Alexander Isak, the new Big Al, is available for selection. And cast your mind back October last year, Newcastle United's trip to Wolves. And it was the last game of the Mike Ashley era, just before the takeover took place. Jeff Hendricks scored in that game in a 2-1 defeat. And a lot of mags, including myself, left that ground soaking wet, looking relegation straight in the face. How times have changed. Referee tomorrow, Peter Banks. That's fresh from his incident-packed VAR shift at St James's Park last week for Manchester City's visit to Newcastle. The last game he took charge of at Newcastle was in April, when we were beaten 1-0, when Wolves were beaten 1-0 at St James's Park. VAR this week is Lee Mason. So this is a good test, Mick, because Wolves aren't a bad team, mate.
And it's also a good test in so much as, come the end of last season, we were side by side. I mean, don't forget in 2016, 2017, which is what, 6 seasons ago, 6 years ago, we were side by side in the championship, So, side by side in the championship, we went straight back up. Wolves had to wait another year. And then Wolves did great, didn't they? If you remember, I think they were 7th and 7th, but they've just dropped of late again. And last season, I think it was only a point or 2 points between them. I think Wolves were 10th, we were 11th. So, it's an interesting parallel between the pair of them because, they were there or thereabouts knocking on the door of Europe only 2 or 3 years ago. So it gives you an example of how you can do it, and you can do it quite quickly. And they did it quite quickly, having been promoted. So, Wolves, again, I think I would have Brighton and Hove Albion, 2 weeks ago, I would have been less confident. Wolves, I would be more confident, even though essentially it's all much of a muchness, isn't it? Brighton and Hove Albion, Wolverhampton Wanderers, Newcastle United. But there's just something about Newcastle at the minute. What will be interesting is, obviously, does Isaac start? And the other one, of course, is Matt Taggart as well, because once upon a time, had Callum Wilson not been injured and Matt Targett not been available, it would have been absolutely stonewall Eddie Howe, unchanged against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Now, of course, he's got to change a couple, or he could change one of them. I think with regard to Matt Taggart, I think Matt Taggart has to probably wait, because against Manchester City, that back four did well enough. But again, because Callum Wilson is injured, despite the fact that Bruno had to wait his time and Botman had to wait their time, I just think he'll throw Alexander Isaac in, and I think he'll start tomorrow. But it's a good test. It's a good test. I can see why Eddie Howe might think, we've had a good start, we're steady away, but I just think the feel good factor, the adrenaline, and I think he's a confident boy as well, Alexander Isaac. I think he's chomping at the bit. So it could be very, very interesting. That said, Wolverhampton Wanderers on their day can be very good as well. They can be very good. It's a tough one to call. It really is a tough one to call.
Yeah, it is. I am going to go for a Newcastle win. I did say yesterday 2-0. I'm going to stick with that. I think Newcastle will have, will have the bit between their teeth. They've had a good run. And Geordie Tubalife makes a point. City, Liverpool, Brighton, Wolves, not an easy start for Newcastle. You're away in the cup, a potential banana skin, but they are doing well. And with this lad going straight into the team, I think he will. I fancy Newcastle to have their tails up.
I would disagree with you in so much as I don't think it'll be as comfortable as that.
Yeah.
I don't see it a 2-0. I don't see it a 3-1. I think it'll be tight. I think it'll be very tight. I would, going back to what I said about Manchester City, I would take a draw, but on this occasion, I just think they might just had enough. But let's be realistic enough to suggest that you've got a young man who's absolutely brand spanking new to Newcastle United, and he's being asked to do the job for our main man, Callum Wilson. And Callum Wilson, up to date, has been the only one, a reliant centre forward, a reliant goal scorer. So for these goals that they've missed, and we've been missing them ever since December, we've missed goals. Yes, we got 3 against Manchester City, but that was almost extraordinary. But again, he scored one of those, Callum Wilson. So there is no Callum Wilson there. So there is a fair emphasis on Alexander Isak if we score goals against Wolverhampton Wanderers. So I think if we win it, we'd have to win it maybe a 1-0 or a 2-1. Let's just wait and see. But I don't see us winning comfortably. I don't see us winning 2-0, 3-1. I really don't.
Okay, are you going to go for a 1-0, Evan?
I am going to go. I don't like 1-0ers. I've never liked a 1-0er. Never liked 1-0ers. I'm going to go 2-1. 2-1. I'm going to go 2-1 and Alexander Isak to win it.
2-1, Alexander Isak to win it. Fantastic. Just a quick mention about our neighbours down the road who ultimately seem to be in another predicament, which they've clearly smashed a few mirrors at the Stadium of Light because the manager, and to be fair, let's face it, Alex Neil has done a very good job on virtually zero money down there. Is now looks as if he's jumping ship and going to Stoke after a year. Yeah.
Well, let me tell you something. Without wanting to go into the rivalry between us and them and red and whites and black and whites, etc. Regardless of the fact that they've gone from 3rd division to 2nd division, that they've had a torrid time, they've lost this manager, they've lost that manager. Essentially, it's been down to the fact that a very big football club and a very good football club for their own people has been absolutely shambolic in the way that it's been run and owned, etc. Let me. I meant to mention this earlier, but NUFC TV, Tom Nipper, brilliant interview with Darren Eales. When this finishes now, go to NUFC TV. There's about 15 minutes on Newcastle's brand new CEO. Have a listen to that fella. Have a listen to what he's got involved and talked about with Newcastle United and how positive and the process and everything that Newcastle have in mind. So have a listen to Darren Eales. But Darren Eales and Dan Ashworth and PIF and the Rubens and Amanda Staveley and Meher Gadusi, they are like a different planet compared to what Sunderland Football Club have been running their football club for the last 2, 3, 4 years, however long it is. So, we can talk about Alex Neil, we can talk about relegations, we can talk about the odd promotion, we can talk about their fans that now there's only 30,000, etc., etc. They have been wasted by their ownership. They have been ruined by their ownership. So, as much as we don't gloat and as much as we don't, I don't know, take great delight in it, it just goes to show you the 14 years that we had with Mike Ashley. They make Mike Ashley look like Rockefeller at this minute in time. They are being absolutely shafted left, right, and centre by appalling ownership. How blessed are we that with the ownership, the CEO, the Sporting Football, and now a record signing? I'm sorry, what goes around comes around.
Yeah, and big up to Tom Nipper. I've watched his stuff. Yeah, he's doing a great job, isn't he?
Absolutely, and it's a fantastic interview. I mean, I spent 25 years, and I thought I was pretty good, eyeball to eyeball. And they're big characters, they're big egos. These people, it's a big interview to do. He's an important person, Darren Eales, and yet Tom, the interview is very, very good. It's of Parkinson standards. It's it's very good. It's very good. Have a listen.
Great stuff, Mick. As always, the hour's passed over too quickly. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the game, mate. And
you enjoy it too.
Okay, take care, mate.
See you later.
Bye-bye.